Welcome back to the team draft of the Bun Magic Cube here at CubeCon in Madison, Wisconsin. Our players have just finished their deck construction. Took a little longer than usual because they're doing it collaboratively here. They get to help with each other's deck construction. But we've got some deck lists here, and it looks like it'll be some very interesting matchups coming forward. Our first match, again, Dom Harvey, recent top 8 in PT Barcelona versus Caleb Durward, last year's CubeCon champion. Dom playing green-white, and Caleb playing teamer mid-range, so perhaps a slog we have in for us. Who do you like in this matchup?
Probably Caleb, because he probably has more tools to deal with what Dom is doing.
That's what I'm thinking. In general, when you're playing a mid-range matchup and you're going to have better removal spells in red and better card draw in blue than your opponent who's purely green-white.
Yeah.
It sounds like an uphill battle for our hero, Dom Harvey, at the very least. One factor that we haven't really talked about that's going to come up a lot in this cube is that there are 3 copies of every Shockland, and there are no natural duels. So Caleb, playing a 3-color mana base here, is going to take a lot of damage from his mana, so that's going to be something that perhaps Dom can leverage to get in early and actually close this game out. Other archetypes we have here, we know that Emma Partlow has drafted red-white aggro, the Fun Police at the table. How do you feel about the Fun Police in Cube?
I feel like that it's a necessary evil.
It's only fun to win if it's hard, right? If you want to, it's the best deck to persevere over when they're supposedly the Fun Police, and you get to have fun in spite of that. So Emma playing red-white aggro. Sam did exactly what we expected. The deck name here I have is 5-color interaction, which is kind of exactly what I expected Sam to do. That is really where we're going to see the rubber hit the road with regards to this painful mana base. We're going to go to the table now to our very first match. Again, Dom Harvey and Caleb Durward. Let's see who wins the roll and how things shake out.
It is really anyone's game.
This is going to be really interesting. I think this is likely to be our longest match. These 2 decks, both mid-range decks. I don't actually know what Caleb's deck list looks like. It looks like he is on the play and leading off here with a Retrofitter Foundry. Retrofitter Foundry, a great way to grind out a win in a long game, and then Dom answering back with a Birds of Paradise. Now, I said this would be a slow match, and the only thing we got going for us is both these are very fast players, so we see Caleb immediately dispatching that Birds of Paradise with a Walking Ballista, not bothering to put it in play or go and get a counter, but in fact just, put it right in the graveyard, send that Birds of Paradise to Jesus. Dom traverse the Ulvenwald for Plains, and then Giver of Runes, which you must have gotten on the wheel, because I recall him taking something else over that Giver in the draft. They're off to the races. Lots of forests in play.
What is that?
This is a Jewel Thief, a little uncommon from the streets of New Capenna that can absolutely hang in this meta. Vigilance, Trample, and it makes a treasure token on ETB, which I believe the players are just agreeing is there. Judges, maybe we can get a treasure on the table there so that our people at home can follow along. That's a Cemetery Prowler now from Dom, which is going to exile that Walking Ballista from Caleb's graveyard, and it's going to make creature spells that Dom casts cheaper to play, which we know that Dom has quite a few creatures in his deck, so that cost reduction is going to be relevant. Already shaping up to be a battlefield-heavy slog here with quite a bit of power and toughness on both sides of the table. We have the Giver of Runes that Dom got to untap with. That's just like your Mother of Runes situation. Now, Giver of Runes can't protect itself, but it can give protection from colorless. So that's going to make any removal out of Caleb's deck a little bit tricky in the face of that Giver of Runes. You kind of have to remove the Giver first before you can unlock the rest of your removal.
So is Giver of Runes sort of like the mom we have at home?
Pretty much, yeah. It was printed in Modern Horizons as, I think, ostensibly a fixed version of Mother of Runes. We see a Noble Hierarch here out of Caleb Durward, which is going to give that Jewel Thief +1/+1 when it attacks if he chooses to attack alone with it with the Exalted trigger. But yeah, so Giver of Runes 1/2 instead of 1/1, which is, that does matter. Against 1/1 tokens, it can be a big advantage. And the protection from colorless actually does come up quite a bit. So it ended up being kind of more of a side grade, though I think most people agree that the original Mother of Runes, quite a bit ruder to play with. Now I think we see, main phase activation of Retrofitter Foundry, which does require tapping. There we go, catching up to that. To play a Gaia's Cradle, a card that Dom really wishes he would have gotten past, but it looks like Caleb soaked it up in the draft. Treasures being sacrificed for red mana to play a Mawloc. Looks like Mawloc on X equals 2 to eat that Giver of Runes. Lots is happening on the board here at CubeCon. This is a pretty big turn here for Caleb. Now, can't swing into the... Well, I mean, could swing into the Cemetery Prowler here because of that Exalted trigger. We don't see Caleb attacking here. That would be a 4-4 swinging into the 3-4 Cemetery Prowler, unless I'm missing something. And as we always say, we're in the booth here because we're not anywhere near as good as players as these people are. So Caleb likely seeing through the Matrix there in a way that I'm not. Dom is resolving a Edge of Autumn here, basically a Rampant Growth to go get it basically and put it into play. So far, I think Caleb's got a pretty good footing in this early game.
Yeah. And that guy's Cradle is pretty scary.
Yeah, now, I mean, with all these creatures in play, Caleb threatens to untap with a lot of mana, and Cradle with Retrofitter Foundry is a bit of a combo. It doesn't go infinite, but it does scale up in this sort of logarithmic way. Have you played with Retrofitter Foundry at all, Jamie?
No.
This card is, at first, somewhat unassuming. Here we see an Oust for that Ignoble Hierarch. People don't often expect to see the removal spells pointed at smaller creatures like Ignoble Hierarch, but in this case, Oust is going to put that into Caleb's library, effectively making his draw a couple turns from now a lot worse. So you're getting rid of the Exalted thing, you're getting rid of that mana fixing, and you're also putting a little trap in there for Caleb's future draws. Yeah, Retrofitter Foundry, one of these cards that is, it looks kind of unassuming at first. Here we see Mawloc getting in for 4. And, yeah, so Retrofitter Foundry looks kind of unassuming. You know, it's a pretty inefficient in terms of mana token generator. But the trick with that card is that you get to block and then upgrade your tokens along the way. So oftentimes a single Retrofitter Foundry, as long as your opponent doesn't have trample, can go a really long way to just eating up a bunch of damage, soaking up a bunch of attacks from your opponent while upgrading tokens so they become an actual threat. One of the challenges of paper coverage here is we don't have real visibility of number of cards in hand. I think Caleb is down to very few, maybe just one card in hand, which really matters, but he does have that mana sink in the Retrofitter Foundry. He will not be, looks like at least 2 cards in hand, now maybe 3. He will not be wanting for something to do with his mana with that Retrofitter Foundry in play. We do see Celestial Colonnade, a relevant creature land on the board for Dom Harvey, though no blue mana to activate it right now. So it looks like Dom trying to figure out how to stem the bleeding here from Caleb's board. Caleb swinging in with all of these tokens, and here we see a little bit of the value Retrofitter Foundry. Okay, you're going to block one of those? I'll turn that one into a Thopter. You take 6, go down to 10.
That is so cool.
Dom actually reading Retrofitter Foundry right now to say, hey, wait a minute, are you allowed to do that? And yes, Dom, you are, and it's very frustrating to play against.
And with the Cradle, like, it just makes more and more mana.
Exactly. And you can actually untap the Retrofitter Foundry for 3 mana, so
yeah.
You can just eventually start to keep amping up and up and up and just making a ton of creatures. It works the same way with Tolarian Academy because all the creatures are also... Here we see Titania, Protector of Argoth, one of the big bombs in Dom's deck, but he has not drawn any of his fetch lands, and honestly did not end up with as many as you'd like to see in a deck like this. So just a 5-3, just a 5-3 pass. Hope that you have no answer for it, and you can figure out some way to put a land in the graveyard next turn, which we don't see on board. We also saw Dom casting that Edge of Autumn, which would have been a free way to make a 5-3 token with Titania, Protector of Argoth. Maybe he didn't have a Titania at the time. Who knows what was going through his head and what this hand looked like. But right now, Titania not looking like a particularly compelling stabilizing force, and Caleb is getting into the red zone as expected, and Dom's had enough. You know, Dom's maybe got some outs here. It's not over, but Dom's not going to play that game out. We're going to go to game 2. Back to the booth here. We are going to thank another one of our sponsors here at CubeCon, and that is a little something called, it says here, MTGO, which I think stands for Magic the Gathering Online. Have you heard of this, Jamie?
Yes.
It turns out this is a way you can play Magic on your computer at home without even leaving the house, which I think sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
You play Magic Online, correct?
Do I play it?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think I've seen you streaming that before. What are some of your favorite formats to play on Magic Online?
Well, I mean, they have very good draft prize support, so I like to do that. There's always cubes. Not always. A lot of times there are cubes on there, so
it's a cube cycle going through. You
Yeah.
can play Commander on Magic Online. You can get all your favorite printings of all your favorite cards. If you're aiming to play in the Pro Tour, you can even qualify for a regional championship in a bunch of different formats online entirely. You don't have to put pants on it. You can qualify for a regional championship, which is quite impressive. So for those of you that don't know what Magic Online is, make sure you check out mtgo.com and play it for yourself. All right, Dom is down a game. Our hero that we watched draft, we're kind of implicitly in his corner for watching him draft. He's down to Caleb's deck, which, we saw tier mid-range. We still actually saw mostly green cards out of Caleb too, so I'm not sure if he just drew mostly green portion of his deck, or if we're really dealing with two primarily green decks, each splashing for a couple other cards. And I got to say, if you're splashing for another card, Moloch is quite a bit better than a lot of the things that we see Dom splashing for. How do you like to break open these mid-range mirrors if you're stuck in a slogfest like this? What are your favorite cards to pull you out from being behind?
I mean, that's hard to say.
Sorry, Jamie. No time for an answer because we're back to the game, and these two players are not wasting any time. Similar start here from Dom with the Birds of Paradise, but it seems to have survived. So we get to actually activate the Birds of Paradise this time, and we're going to play a Kasali Pride Mage and blow up what looks like a Utopia Sprawl that was Caleb Durward's first play. 3 mana to get rid of your 1 mana enchantment. Not a great play on tempo. My guess is that Dom is gambling that Caleb kept a land light hand on the back of that Utopia Sprawl, either for color fixing or for mana generation in general. And here we see Wild Growth, the Utopia Sprawl at home, as it were, making the other forest tap for 2, and a Manamorphose. A lot of spells on the stack here for Caleb Durward.
Fast start.
Into Fire Ice, 1 to your bird, 1 to you. And this is why I was saying in this cube, the graveyards fill up fast. You can get Delirium. You can Delve threats are really good here because, that is turn 2 for Caleb. We got 3 cards in the yard and quite a bit of mana generation in play. Slower start here for both people, though, in terms of actual threats. And here comes a Courser of Crufix. This is definitely a way to break open a mid-range mirror like this. Caleb playing that island off the top. Effective card advantage. You are going to have to reveal the top card of your library there, Caleb. It is revealed at all times. Yeah, he gets to see that first. Ooh, and it's Cradle. Source of Plowshares sending that Courser of Crufix back from whence it came to the Exile Zone. Now we see a Marsh Flats out of Dom, which I'm noting just as a way to make any future Titanias much better now that we have a fetch land in the graveyard to actually get that token out of Titania, which is the whole reason you play it, let's be honest. Here is Dom's pack 1, pick 1, Asika's Chariot. Going to make 2 cat tokens and start generating snowballing advantage here if Caleb does not have an answer for either the tokens or the chariot or some combination of the two. Jewel Thief is back again, making that treasure token. The great thing about Jewel Thief is in a mid-game situation like this, it effectively just costs 2, right? Because Caleb now has that treasure to use. Yeah. So fixed mana a little bit, and you got a 2 mana, 3/3 Vigilance Trample is quite good.
For a common, yeah.
Looks like we're waiting for the judges here to pull these cat tokens so we can have a clear board state. Everyone at home knows what's going on. We love that. These players just too eager to get into the game and start battling to wait for such dalliances like tokens.
Are there a lot of token producers in the queue?
There are, just by virtue of the fact that I'm trying to play at a high power level, but there's fewer than a lot of people play in similar kinds of cubes. Okay. So, I try and limit them where possible because it does cause a lot of hassles like we're seeing here.
Right.
Just a lot to keep track of. So here the Chariot does have onboard attacks. We don't know what Caleb could have in his hand. And here we see the Titania. This is a very different game. We have Dom curving out 2 of his highest picks, Asika's Chariot into Titania. Titania going to make a 5/3 immediately. Now that token can be copied with Asika's Chariot. And this is what I was talking about in the draft portion, where on its own, Chariot is just going to be a cat snowball machine. It's going to...
Which is powerful.
Which is already powerful, but Dom is going to make that look silly now by, instead of turning into a cat generating machine, turning into a 5/3 elemental generating machine with Titania.
Do the elementals have any sort of... do they have trample or anything?
No text, no keywords on the elementals. They are just 5/3. It's just power and toughness. 2 of the most important keywords you could possibly have. And now Dom flooding the board with a ton of tokens and really demanding a big answer from Caleb. And in your teamer deck, you don't... I'm not going to see a board wipe, right, at a teamer. That's not going to happen. We see a Shark Typhoon here, though. So this will actually allow Caleb to block with the Shark token and the Jewel Thief to trade for the Chariot, which... This is not a good deal for Caleb, right? We're not happy about this, but this is what we have to do because we can't let these tokens keep generating over and over again and keep getting 5/3s turn over turn.
Right.
Or it looks like actually we're seeing the cycle for the Shark, drawing a card, getting more information, and then choosing not to block. So maybe Caleb just wanted that information to inform a potential block, or maybe he drew an answer. We're not sure yet, but that's what happened here. So a total of 15, 19, 23 power on the board now for Dom. I'm not sure what turn of the game we're on. I want to say 4 or 5. So it's definitely an explosive start out of that deck, which is definitely something it's capable of.
Yeah.
And now looking for some sort of explosive answer from Caleb to keep him in this game. Shark getting in for some damage. We're going to Skull Clamp the Shark to draw 2 cards. And then scoop them up. All right. We said this would be the slowest match, and these players are doing their best to make a liar out of me by just scooping it up as soon as they don't want to play this game anymore. Say, I'm having no fun. I'm taking my cards and I'm going home. Well, we're going to a game 3, though, to see how we're going to settle this. And Dom, as the winner of the last game, presumably will be on the draw, giving Caleb the first chance to establish his board and start building up some threats. How about that game? And we saw a very different deck out of Dom that time.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. I'm going to be honest.
I think it's going to really matter the order in which these players draw their cards. Now, again, we don't know how much blue Caleb has. We saw Shark Typhoon that game. We know that his deck is ostensibly teamer mid-range. Blue is going to have more ability to see more cards, draw cards, shape their draws, get some card selection. Dom is kind of at the mercy of the top of his deck. There's very little card selection in Dom's deck, so if he draws the cards in the right order, it's going to be quite powerful. But if he doesn't, he might be on the receiving end of just choice removal spells from Caleb or an even more explosive start, which we know is possible with things like Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah.
There's stuff on for Game 3. I wonder how our players might be sideboarding here. So if you are playing this sort of mid-range matchup, what are your kind of favorite kinds of cards to bring in out of the sideboard in a matchup like this if you have access to them? Let's play, Magical Christmas Land Shopping. Let's pretend you have any card out of your sideboard you want. What do you want to bring in against one of these players?
I mean, probably some artifact removal for the
Now that we've seen Titania, we've seen Titania, and also on the other side of the board, we've seen Retrofitter Foundry, so artifact removal certainly would be appealing in this situation. I also would love to see some big removal spells. Stuff to get rid of the really big threats would be great. So, yeah. Titania is a really interesting card. It represents a lot of power, right? We saw Titania put 10 power into play. The turn it was played. That's scary.
Right, and fast.
It is scary. It is fast. You can Bolt Titania, right? Because Titania enters the battlefield. There is an enter the battlefield ability to get a land, put it into your graveyard from play, and you don't get that elemental until you sacrifice that land. So you got a little window there where if you can Bolt Titania or move her in some other way, you can save that. But we're going right back to Game 3 here. Not wasting any time.
Wow.
We have no visibility here into mulligans, which I do think matter quite a bit in this matchup. Again, with very little card selection on either side of the table, it would appear being down a card might matter quite a bit. Here we see a free Once Upon a Time from Dom Harvey in his first turn. Going to go get a land or creature of his choice and put it into his hand.
That's got to feel good.
That'll make a lot of opening hands really good if one of your cards is Once Upon a Time. A little land heavy, go get a creature. You need your land, go get a land. And he gets Titania. Now, the information is real, so we know that Dom has one of his sledgehammers in his hand. We know, and so does Caleb. And Caleb will, of course, be playing with that information and trying to stem the possible damage from a Titania whenever it comes down. Bird of Paradise is the follow-up here from Dom. And now, Sylvan Library. This is a card I love for breaking open a mid-range matchup. This is the kind of card draw that Dom simply does not have access to. Celestial Colonnade for Dom, getting set up over there. So far, these games have been fast. They've been fiery, and the creature lands have not had a chance to matter in the slightest. So right now, that Celestial Colonnade playing a lot like a Guild Gate. Maybe it'll have a chance to shine if these players can get to some sort of board stall.
Titania is 5 mana?
Titania is 5 mana. It is 3 green for Titania. And again, really Dom, I think, is going to be trying not to cast Titania until he has a land in the graveyard.
Right.
Or possibly an Edge of Autumn in hand, because that will cycle for free just by sacrificing a land. One of those two things is what I want to see if I'm Dom before I go committing my 5-drop to the board. All right, Caleb tanking on that Sylvan Library. I don't actually know if he... Looks like he did not keep any extra cards, but he does have a fetch land, and this is the kind of environment where Sylvan Library can really shine. So Caleb gets to do something not quite a brainstorm, doesn't get to put cards from his hand back on top of his library, but gets his choice of the top 3 cards, and then can shuffle away the ones he doesn't want. So here, Caleb kept the best card, and then 2 cards he didn't like, shuffled them right away with that Polluted Delta. Very powerful, and as this game goes on longer, that Sylvan Library will accrue a sort of advantage that Dom will have a very hard time surmounting. So I think Dom needs to be just pedal to the metal right now. He needs to go as fast as he possibly can because that Sylvan Library says you are not winning a long game against me.
Right. It's just too much value over time.
Yes, and value that he just can't compete with, really. And we don't see card advantage in the card draw sense from Dom Harvey. Now, he does have card advantage in the virtual sense. We saw last game making just an explosion of tokens. You know, tokens a portion of a card. That's a sort of card advantage, but he's really got to think about how he's going to play this long game if he doesn't And so far, no threats. You don't like to see land pass out of your mid-range deck on 4 mana. That's not really where you want to be. And here we see Dom making an attempt at answering that Sylvan Library, at least for a while. He's going to respond to the petty theft on his Birds of Paradise by casting Unexpectedly Absent and tucking that Sylvan Library under the top 2 cards of Caleb's library. So it's going to be a couple more turns before we start to see those Sylvan Library decisions come back to play. Oh, or not. Now we just have Jace. And Jace will allow Caleb to find that Sylvan Library right now if he so chooses. And he is, in fact, going to 0 to Brainstorm. You know, you often want to plus your Jace if you expect some sort of burn-based removal or some creatures in play. But empty board, opponent's not playing red. I'll just start Brainstorming every turn. Thank you very much. That will be fine. And this is, yet again, another example of the kind of card advantage that Dom does not have access to. So,
right. He has to answer that pretty much immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dom's plan here has to be the aggressor. I think he's been put into the situation where he needs to end this game. He needs to start pressuring Caleb's life total. And as of right now, he doesn't have the tools to do so. He does, however, have an answer for Jace the Mind Sculptor in the form of Phyrexian Revoker. The Birds of Paradise is redeployed. And we also see a cheeky little treetop village down there. That's one you don't want to forget about. That's just 2 mana to turn that into a 3/3 with Trample. That can pressure Planeswalkers. That can even end games in a cube like this if everything else fails.
Backup plan.
Yes. And we see a robust backup plan here from Dom in the 2 creature lands. But you know what? 2 creature lands are not going to go the distance against Jace and Sylvan Library. So a lot more blue. We're seeing the blue side of Caleb's deck. I'm not sure if he has sided into more of this blue or if he just happened to draw more of it this game and we happen to see green heavy spells in the first couple games. But it's definitely the kind of game now where both our players are enabling they're pursuing their strategy, right? They're both enacting their plan. And here we see fetch land into what I expect will be Titania, which is exactly the kind of thing. Oh my goodness, this is beautiful. All right, so in response to the fetch land activation, we see Vendilion Click, and this is what I was talking about. Caleb saw on turn 1 that hammer get put into Dom's hand, that huge bomb, and held that Vendilion Click till exactly the right time, which was in response to that land going to the graveyard. Dom had no window there to cast the Titania with the land in the graveyard to get the full value out of it, and then just has to bottom it. And I'll tell you what, the card he's drawing is not going to be as good as Titania because, I mean, I guess it could be Nissa. That would be almost as good, but certainly not in this board state. Even Nissa in this board state is going to be rough because the value Nissa provides is relatively slow, all things considered. I mean, Titania is just going to put 10 power in play. That just says, answer me sooner, you're going to die. Whereas Nissa is going to make a 3/3 and then give you a little mana. It's going to be a little slower burn to actually get your opponent dead. Now, Dom says, okay, you've gotten rid of all my other options. You've said I don't get to play my Titania, and we're just going to send this Treetop Village at Jace, which is going to trade with the Vendilion Click, and also 2 of that damage is going to trample over, leaving Jace at a perilous 1 devotion. And then we see the Brazen Borrower flashed in there on the end step from Caleb, and then getting immediately into the red zone, putting Dom at 16. So Caleb's deck playing a lot more controlling in this matchup. We have card advantage. We have some evasive attackers that are going to chip in some damage while Caleb is controlling the game. The name of this game has been that Vendilion Click. That was a masterful Vendilion Click out of Caleb, and you love to see cards played like that. It's just played to its fullest potential in that situation. We even got to see, we see that Dom's hand has a couple more lands in it that perhaps he would like. And Caleb had that information, too, when he got to decide whether or not he traded with that Treetop Village. If you think that mana is going to matter, maybe trading with the Treetop Village is more appealing there. But that Vendilion Click, giving that information and answering that Titania has really stemmed Dom's start here. And he's got his hand on his mouth, shocked and appalled at what's happening to him. Manamorphose out of Caleb here. Not sure what colors of mana he's making. Perhaps black and white just to intimidate his opponent. Maybe there's a question at the table, it looks like, perhaps. So what's going on here?
So Caleb has 2 cards in hand?
I can't quite tell. He's moving them around quick. It looks like it looks like exactly 2 cards in hand for Caleb to the 3 on Dom's side of the board. But we know one is a forest and one is an oust.
Yeah.
And, while it is really nice to oust the Ignoble Hierarch, it's not that nice to oust a Brazen Borrower. And it's really, really not nice to oust a Mawloc. Here we see Mawloc with the rare Ravenous text, which is going to allow Caleb to draw a card in addition to eating that Phyrexian Revoker. And I got to say, that's a big, big swing. Having that giant creature come down, take your creature away, and also draw me a card. That's a 3-for-1, a very, very solid 3-for-1, which I'm not sure what Dom's going to do in this spot, to be honest. I hate to see our hero go down like this, but it's not looking good.
I mean, he needs an answer or a threat quickly, and
Caleb sending a strong message. I'm the CubeCon champion. Don't you come to my house and try and play me in Cube. This is what I do. And of course, Jace the Mind Sculptor, a perfect example of the kind of card that just, it feels like your opponent always has it. How do they always have the right card at the right time? I can't figure out what it is. Could it be the brainstorming every turn?
Right.
Could that perhaps be contributing to why my opponent has everything they want? And we mentioned this in between games. Dom at the mercy of the top of his deck here. There's not a lot Dom can do other than hope he draws what he needs.
Which he needs a lot.
He needs a lot, and Caleb does not have such a reliance. Caleb gets to pick and choose what he wants depending on the game state and change his mind and start to seek different cards with that Jace. Here we do have a possible, so with the Birds of Paradise blue, we could see Celestial Colonnade activated here to get rid of Jace. But at this point, Jace has done a lot of the damage, and to effectively tap out to kill the Jace and then be staring down an enormous Maul Lock, still a 3-1 flyer in play, not the greatest option. So Dom considering whether or not that's what he wants to do or if he wants to spend his mana on developing his board. I think you need an answer to the Maul Lock. You need an answer to the Jace. Answering both in one turn is going to be hard because, again, that Oust, which is a removal spell I really love. I think it's a really interesting and a fun removal spell to play with. Looking really bad right here against that Maul Lock. You just simply cannot give that Maul Lock back to Caleb 2 turns later. That's not an option.
No, this is looking pretty rough for Dom.
Dom perhaps a little less willing to just scoop him up, though. This is game 3. Maybe willing to play to narrow outs. And he has decided that, you know what? It feels awful. We saw him shake his head as he did it. But he does decide to oust that Maul Lock and then, in fact, just kill Jace with Giver of Runes instead of committing all of his mana to that Celestial Colonnade. Then we see Eternal Witness coming down. Has a choice of Oust, Once Upon a Time, Fetch Land. We're getting the Once Upon a Time. So that is some of the very little card selection Dom does have. And now he's saying, all right, well, I'm going to answer that card in the best way I can, which is admittedly not that great. And now I'm going to try and draw something really good with my Once Upon a Time. Though I will say, the best threats left in Dom's deck are the Wandering Emperor and Nissa Who Shakes the World, which you can't get with Once Upon a Time. I would say his best hit here is probably something like Timeless Dragon, which is not really going to turn this game around, because, again, that's just going to get eaten by that Maul Lock in a turn. Skyclave Apparition. Now, there's a good answer to Maul Lock. That's a really good answer to Maul Lock. Even though Skyclave Apparition can only hit small mana value things, that Maul Lock in play is just a 2 mana value creature, even if Caleb dumps 8, 9 mana into it. That's where that Ravenous keyword that Caleb's going to draw a card when he pays a sufficient amount for X is really going to matter, because, sure, okay, you can remove it. That's great. I already killed one of your things and drew a card, so that's fine by me. 2 cards in hand for both players. And it's funny, if you jumped into this game at this state right now, you would think that Dom was ahead, but we know Maul Lock is coming. So
yeah.
So even though Dom looks okay right now, we know and he knows that there is a big problem coming down the lane, and it is that Maul Lock, which I believe Caleb has drawn just now, if I have not lost count. Maybe I have lost count, because he's just passed the turn. So I think it's next turn we're going to expect to see that Maul Lock then.
I don't see a gold card. It's hard to tell, though.
Eternal Witness getting in. Caleb opting to keep his Brazen Borrower to be on Chump Block the Celestial Colonnade in the future duty, or perhaps chip in for damage duty. Knight of the Railquake goes on the stack from Dom, and it's remanded by Caleb. Dom says, all right, fine, I'll do it again. I got plenty of mana. I don't need you. So as much as it seems like Dom may have stabilized here, again, this Maul Lock is going to really clean things up, unless I've missed something. Was there some reason that Caleb had to shuffle or something we missed? I don't think so, in which case...
I think it's in his hand now.
Now, there is something to say for the Giver of Runes. I mean, Maul Lock pretty much has to take the Giver of Runes out here, because Giver can just protect anything else that the Maul Lock would hit. But Caleb will be left with a giant threat, the biggest thing on board by a wide margin, and will also draw a card for his trouble whenever he decides to deploy this card. I don't know. Instead, we see a different line here. Snapcaster Mage. This is a main phase Snapcaster Mage here to go and get Manamorphose. Oh, you know what? All this time, Caleb has not had red mana. That's what happened.
Oh.
I thought we saw Utopia Sprawl there, but we don't know what color that named. So I think Caleb has been trapped on red mana, which makes that Alice look way better than I thought it did. But now we see a Snapcaster Mage just on mana fixing duty to allow this Mawloc to finally come down. Or it looks like Caleb also has Flame of Anor in his hand, which he's going to get both modes with that Snapcaster Mage because he does control a wizard. That's going to be 5 damage to the Giver of Runes and draw 2 cards. Perhaps just draw me naturally into my next red source so I can cast a small lock later. And that is really, really rough here.
Yeah.
Dom opting to give his Knight of the Reliquary protection on the way out. Might as well. That Giver is not going to survive anyway. The card advantage that Caleb is generating here while interacting with the board is posing a big problem for Dom. We see draw 2 cards, kill your thing, make a Mawloc, kill your thing, draw a card. This sort of play pattern is really hard for a fair creature deck like Dom's to combat.
Right, and his life total, I mean...
He is at just 7,
yeah.
So he's got to be careful to just not die to a couple attacks from that Brazen Borrower here. And now we got Exalted, too, on that Brazen Borrower, so we do have a Birds of Paradise to chump with, so that will be on chump duty at some point soon here. We probably can't hold up mana for the Celestial Colonnade all the time. We have very little instant speed plays in Dom's deck.
He has 1 card in hand?
Yeah, it looks like 1 card in hand. We don't know what it is. We do have a Knight of the Reliquary that can do a little bit of work here. Dom did not end up with any great Knight of the Reliquary targets. We mentioned in the draft that he knew he wasn't getting Field of the Dead because we saw that in Pack 1. He got the Knight in Pack 2. He did not end up with a card like Urza Saga or a card like Wasteland. Not that Wasteland does literally anything right now. It doesn't. Wasteland's no good right now. He didn't end up with another really appealing target. I mean, he has Colonnade and the Treetop Village, which he's already kind of used those resources. But nothing that's going to totally turn his game around, I don't think, on the back of this Knight of the Reliquary. So now, still waiting for red. Yeah, this is the game where the Utopia Sprawl got blown up by the Kasali Pride Mage, and the Wild Growth stuck around. So that is why Caleb has been stuck on this Mawloc in hand. Elvish Reclaimer, that will fix for red if he gets to untap with it. And a Gaia's Cradle. So this Mawloc eventually will be for an enormous X value, most likely. Oh, we have Ignoble Hierarch now. We have our red from Ignoble Hierarch, of course. I missed that last turn. So we've got our red. Mawloc is likely coming now, I would guess, based on how all this mana is being tapped. Now, I mean, Caleb does have to think. He is playing into a couple open blue mana. 3 blue mana from the Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, and Celestial Colonnade. No real knowing of what kind of counter spells that Dom might have. You might choose to play around a Mana Leak here or something. Looks like we are committing all of our resources, save for 2 lands, to the Mawloc, thus making it an enormous 11-11, destroying that Knight of the Reliquary, drawing Caleb a card. That's going to go get, I think, the last creature land in Dom's deck, which is that Restless Vinestalk. Now, Restless Vinestalk, normally pretty good against a big creature like Mawloc because you can attack and actually shrink your opponent's creature, but it's got all those puzzle counters. It's not going to work in that situation. Looks like Colonnade
was on chump duty.
Looks like Colonnade was just on... Colonnade went to the graveyard because what attacked? Oh, yeah, it traded. It traded with the... because of the Exalted trigger on the Brazen Borrower. Colonnade was on trade duty, not block duty. All right. We see a cycled Edge of Autumn from Dom. Skycave Apparition, which Caleb did know about. Caleb knew that Skycave Apparition was here. So now... I think maybe, I dare say, I mean, Caleb drew a lot of cards last turn, so, we can't say anything with certainty, but we're starting to reach the point of the game where Dom's creature lands could really start to matter. The Restless Vinestalk is the only one remaining. The Treetop Village and the Celestial Colonnade have both gone to the graveyard, but this Restless Vinestalk, here we go. We see this coming in. This is going to attack and either make the Birds of Paradise a 3/3. That is, in fact, it looks like it's what Dom's considering. There's no reason to shrink your opponent's creatures right now. So the question is, does he want to keep up a flying chump blocker? Does he want to get in for some more damage? Dom in the tank thinking about it. This is what can happen in a cube like this. We've seen some really explosive games out of these decks. But now the cards have traded. We've kind of ground the game out. And I still think, we don't know why yet, but I think Caleb's probably in a good position here with all the cards he's drawn relative to Dom, who has laid all of his cards on the table. Dom's plan is completely transparent. I've played all my cards. I played my last answer you knew about. I've got this Restless Vinestalk. I intend to attack you with it. And Caleb is the one that potentially has some tricks up his sleeve. We'll see what he drew off that Flame of Anor and the Mawloc last turn. First thing, we're just going to cycle through this Waterlogged Grove, perhaps indicating that, in fact, Caleb does not have any tricks up his sleeve. Immediately cycling through that Horizon land. And now, thinking a little bit.
Does he have all lands in hand?
And just passing the turn. So, here, no flying blockers out of Caleb.
Yeah.
Which means that Dom, just by doing what he did last turn, animating that Restless Vinestalk, attacking with the Birds of Paradise and the Vinestalk, means you've got a Vinestalk that needs to be chump blocked, and you've got 3 in the air that, on board, it appears that Caleb has no answer to.
Lots of mana and cards, though.
Yeah, lots of mana and cards, though I do think that the immediate cycling of that Waterlogged Grove last turn is a sign of weakness. Perhaps something that Dom is going to seize on and say that you don't have anything. You wouldn't be just pitching land immediately if you had anything else to do with your mana.
I don't think he has a choice. He has to be aggressive here,
Ultimately,
right?
yeah, I think you're right. No matter what Dom thinks Caleb has in his hand, I'm not sure how many options he reasonably has. He just wants to end this game because who knows what those cards could be. I'd rather not find out. My game plan is transparent. Let's get in here. So we see the Restless Vinestalk, the Birds of Paradise, and the Eternal Witness. We can surmise with the power of deduction that he has targeted the Birds of Paradise with the Restless Vinestalk. He's pointing now just to make that 100% clear. Otherwise, the Birds of Paradise has no power and it's not worth attacking with. We have a 3/3 flyer in the air, a 2/1 on the ground, and the Restless Vinestalk. Caleb, I believe, does have enough lands with this activation now to turn on this Elvish Reclaimer, which is going to trade with the Vinestalk now. That's going to make the Elvish Reclaimer into a 3/4, plus the Snapcaster Mage. That will all sort of trade in a bloodbath, which is stemming the damage here. That is effectively an answer to how Dom is threatening to win this game. Oh, he does not. He's showing us there are no lands in his deck. There are no lands in his deck. He just activated Elvish Reclaimer, got his Shelter Thicket, and that is it. I think Caleb has in fact drawn quite a few lands. We can figure out at this point. Fist bump. I don't know what just happened. Who conceded? Someone tell me what happened. I thought I was following this game pretty closely, but I don't. What just happened?
That was quite the game. Yeah, I don't know.
Activate Reclaimer. Show you my deck. Show you I have no lands left. He wasn't dead on that attack.
Right, and then Dom didn't
The
really have
Vinestalk
another
was going to get traded.
Right. So
Justin, can we get some help? What just happened? There was a dismember. Dom dismembered the Elvish Reclaimer. See, Dom with his tricky little sleight of hand didn't even see that happen.
I didn't see it either.
Dismembering the Elvish Reclaimer is going to be what does it. So, yeah, that is quite a way to end that match. It got really clogged up at the end there. There was a lot of big boards, and it was swinging back and forth quite a bit. You know, it seemed like that Mawloc was really going to turn the game around. Then it turns out that Caleb actually had to scramble a little bit to find red mana to recast it, making that oust look reasonable out of Dom. I love those games. So that was some great magic back and forth. Great magic here in Madison, Wisconsin.
That was a great game 3.
Oh, boy. All right, so we know that Team England is up at least 1-0. Again, this is a team draft, so individual records don't matter. All that matters is the greater good. Dom scored a win for Team England, and so they're up at least 1-0. We don't know the outcomes of these other matches. We'll find out as the stream goes on. Our next match is going to be Emma Partlow versus Sam Black. Emma playing red-white aggro. I know Emma likes to play an aggro deck, and it seems like she has played to her strengths here and drafted what, by all accounts, according to what's coming through the grapevine, is a pretty disgusting-looking aggro deck. And Sam on his classic 5-color brew. How do you like this matchup, Jamie?
I'm very interested to see how it plays out.
I think
it could go either way, right? If she gets the nice curve out and gets everything going, like she could just run Sam over.
I think what we're going to see here is a big importance placed on that mana base. I think we heard that Sam Henley has a couple basic lands in his whole deck, which means that he's playing either tapped lands or shock lands. There's nothing else available to him in this environment. So he's either going to be playing off curve all game to not take damage from his lands, or he's going to be taking damage against the aggro deck to try and answer Emma's threats. There's going to be a really interesting tension there in whether Emma can get under Sam before all this powerful 5 colors worth of cards that Sam has jammed into the deck can turn the corner, or whether Sam is just going to have enough K commands and whatnot to dispatch all of Emma's threats. And then we'll find out who's going to win here between England and Wisconsin, which I got to say, I'm glad to see Dom win that first game. I'm glad to see England up a point. I'm a little bit on England's team here. I got to be honest. I think Wisconsin, it's the home team. They're like the favorite. You got to root for the underdog. That's what we do in America, ironically, is root for the underdog, which in this case is England. England's the underdog in America, and that's who we're rooting for. Any other thoughts on our next match before we head to a quick break?
Well, I'm just wondering in general for this cube, are there a lot of like board stalls that happen?
No, there are not.
Okay.
This cube tends to be relatively fast. There's a lot of removal, and in general, where I can as a cube designer, I always favor things that are going to remove game pieces rather than add more if I have the option. This is actually something we've had Sam on our podcast to talk about his idea of big and small games, which is just that the number of resources in play and in hand for each player dictates the viability of different cards in different scenarios strategically. And this, I aim to be a very small game environment. So basically, I have more removal than I have blockers. I'm not going to run a wall of omens. I'd much rather just run another removal spell. Because if you're going to be blanking your opponent's attacker, I'd rather it happen with fewer creatures in play. So board stalls are kind of rare. And in the last game, it got the game went on a little bit long, but there wasn't ever really a true stall. There were still attacks going back and forth, here and there, and that's what we tend to see. The creature ends end up mattering. You end up getting by on those small edges. But we're going to go to a quick break, but don't you go anywhere, because when we come back, we have got Emma Partlow bringing the red-white aggro heat to Sam Black's home turf against this 5-color deck. Don't miss this.